when a black Marine was arrested for his clothes and skin. His war buddy rewrote justice. Detroit, Monday, 10 a.m. A black man stepped out of a silver SUV parked along the curb in front of the city's largest bank. He wore a dark hoodie, fitted cargo pants, and a pair of worn-out combat boots. Not out of fashion, but out of habit. The kind of habit that sticks with you when you've survived a war and learned to move quietly in a world that watches too loudly. His name was Solomon Drayton, a former U.S. Marine who'd made it through Kandahar Fallujah and the silent war that followed after his wife passed. Today, he wasn't here for himself. He was here to withdraw a lifetime of savings to pay his son Tyron's college tuition. The final promise he had made to the woman he couldn't save from cancer 5 years ago. His steps were slow but steady as he reached the bank's glass door. He pulled out his wallet not to check his balance, but to retrieve something much more fragile. A folded, worn letter, handwritten, the soft curves of a woman's script. Promise me, no matter where life takes you, never let go of our son's dreams. He folded it carefully, tucked it close to his chest, then opened the door and stepped inside. The bank was cold, quiet, courteous, but the air changed the moment Solomon walked in. Across the lobby, Karen, a teller at the front desk, looked up from her monitor, her eyes fixed on his hoodie, his boots, his skin. Just a few seconds, but long enough for the worst kind of assumptions to bloom. She pulled down her headset slightly, whispered to the woman beside her. "He doesn't look like he's here to make a withdrawal. I'm calling security." Solomon kept walking, not because he didn't notice, but because he'd noticed it too many times to care anymore. He reached the counter, opened his wallet, slid his bank card forward. Karen didn't take it. Instead, she pressed a button under the desk and muttered into her headset, "Suspicious customer. I need an immediate check." Less than 30 seconds later, 2 security guards came through the hallway to the left. They didn't ask what was going on. They didn't need a reason, not when the color of his skin had already spoken louder than any alarm. Solomon turned. His eyes met theirs, calm, unflinching, not angry, not afraid, just the quiet steel of a man who had walked through fire and come back without burning. People began to stare. But this story? This was just the beginning. The main lobby of Hamilton and Creed Bank was as still as a cathedral. Polished marble floors gleamed underfoot. Crystal chandeliers cast soft amber light over tailored suits and luxury businesswear. Some ambient instrumental music drifted from hidden speakers, just loud enough to seem polite, yet not quite warm. In the center of the lobby, a massive LED screen slowly rotated a corporate ad loop. At Hamilton and Creed, we believe in equity. We believe in trust. We believe in banking for all. Banking for all. The slogan floated above Solomon's head. Even as Karen repeated herself, "I'll need to see additional identification. Something other than your bank card." Solomon furrowed his brow slightly, said nothing. He calmly handed her his driver's license. Just a few feet away, a white man in a polo shirt approached another teller. 10 seconds later, he was smiling, signing, and being served, no questions asked. Karen examined Solomon's ID as if hunting for a flaw. Her fingers tapped the desk softly, but her eyes remained sharp, almost waiting. "And how much are you withdrawing today?" "All of it." Solomon's voice was low, steady. "Account ending in 4823. It's for my son's college tuition." Karen blinked, not out of emotion, but disbelief. Then suddenly, Solomon's vision shifted. Smoke, gunfire slicing through the air, the blistering heat of sunlight over Afghan sands. He wasn't in a bank anymore. He was back there, A Marine sergeant once more, pulling a bleeding man with silver hair out of burning rubble. The walls were collapsing. Bullets screamed overhead. "Don't leave me here. I'm not leaving you, Creed. Just hold on to me." That man, Daniel Creed, would later become the CEO of Hamilton and Creed Bank. But in that moment, he was just a terrified soldier. And Solomon, the only reason he survived. Now, in the present, Creed was only a few floors above, separated by glass and time, unaware that the man who saved his life was just downstairs, being treated like a threat. Neither of them knew what fate had arranged, not a reunion on a battlefield, but a new kind of war, a silent one, fought in the heart of a so-called civilized America. Karen leaned slightly over the glass partition. Her voice was low, but just loud enough for others to hear. "I believe this man is trying to make an unauthorized withdrawal." Solomon looked up. His eyes were sharp, but not angry. "I've presented every document, the biometric verification. Everything checks out." Karen didn't look at the card, didn't glance at the scholarship document bearing an official government seal. She only looked at his skin, his dark hoodie, and those eyes that had seen war. "I'll let security handle this," she said. Two security guards approached. One, tall, white, hand hovering near his belt. The other, younger, uncertain, eyes flickering between Karen and Solomon. "Sir, we're going to have to ask you to come with us," the tall one said. "I'm not going anywhere," Solomon replied, his voice calm, steady. "I'm here to withdraw tuition money for my son. I've done nothing wrong." Karen stepped in, this time without the pretense of politeness. "People like you don't belong in a bank like this." The room froze. A college student standing in line behind them instinctively pulled out his phone. "Reese, this is 2025, and they're treating a black veteran like a criminal? What the hell is happening?" The first hashtag was typed. # bank racism. The guards grabbed Solomon's arm. A cold steel handcuff locked around his wrist. Click. Like a sentence handed down, without trial. But Solomon didn't resist, didn't plead. He simply reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out his phone. On the screen, a wallpaper photo. Tyron, his son, wearing a high school graduation gown, smiling in front of a sign. Accepted. Michigan State University. Bright eyes. Pure hope. Solomon looked at it, held on to that image like it was the last quiet place he had left. His face didn't flinch, but in his eyes, there was a pain so familiar it no longer needed expression. From across the lobby, the massive screen kept looping. Hamilton and Creed. "We believe in equity. We believe in everyone." A soldier, in handcuffs, because of his skin. A bank. Preaching belief in everyone. And the whole country? Was about to decide which one was telling the truth. The security camera above teller window 3 captured every second. A middle-aged black man, handcuffed in the center of a crowded bank. A teller named Karen, her face flushed, hands trembling, still trying to look in control. And all around them, the eyes of witnesses. Some uneasy, some indifferent, some quietly pulling out their phones. Solomon didn't struggle, didn't raise his voice. He simply lifted his head, looked the guard in the eye, and spoke. Clear, steady, unshaken. "I haven't done anything wrong." He didn't shout, but the words echoed all the way to the back of the marble lobby. Silence, heavy, lingering. Long enough for the truth to settle into the air. Karen's hands clenched. She snapped her head toward the other employees. "He's playing the victim. Can't you see that? He's doing something. I just know it." The calmer Solomon remained. The more unhinged Karen became. Her voice rose. Her arms flailed, but her words no longer owned the room. At the back desk, a young black employee, maybe in her 30s, hair in a tight bun, whispered to her coworker, "They're targeting him just because he's black." On TikTok, what started as a small live stream had now passed 30,000 viewers in 15 minutes. The video was being reposted with the caption, "Black veteran, wrongfully accused," in a bank that says "Banking for all." Comments flooded in. "He's so calm. That's what makes this worse. Where are the managers?" His eyes. Man, I felt that. Solomon closed his eyes for a brief second, not out of fear, but to steady the pillar inside him, the one that held him upright through Iraq, through Okinawa, and now, here, in the heart of the very country he fought for, a bank, supposed to hold people's trust, now felt more like a battleground, and every stare pointed at Solomon was no longer just watching. They were choosing a side. Thump, thump. The sound of polished leather shoes echoed across the marble floor. The revolving glass door at the front of the bank spun open. One man walked in, then another, then three, then six. All of them wore black suits, white shirts, simple ties. No one said a word. But the way they moved, the way they stood, the way they looked, it made the air in the lobby hold its breath. They didn't line up. They didn't need to. One stood by the ATM. One leaned casually against a column. One approached the information desk. No one announced they were together, but everyone knew. They were a unit. Upstairs, behind tempered glass on the second floor, Daniel Creed, CEO of Hamilton and Creed Bank, was watching the surveillance feed. The footage played in crisp silence. Solomon, in handcuffs, from every angle. That face. The face that once dragged him out of a bullet storm in Iraq, 2007. Now being treated like a criminal in his own country. Creed stood up, his heart pounding. That's him. That's Solomon. Back in the lobby, one of the suited men stepped forward. Tattoos wrapped around his wrist, a faded scar behind his ear. Eyes that had once looked through the veil of death. Looked at Karen, looked at the guards, then raised a finger, pointed directly at Solomon. This man saved all of us. If it weren't for him, I, and the 5 standing with me, would have never made it out of Kandahar. Don't you dare accuse a man like him. A customer near the front entrance raised his phone. The camera was already recording. His hand trembled slightly, but his voice was clear. This is what justice looks like. Instagram exploded. A reel went viral in seconds, captions spreading like fire. The quiet ones are never alone. Karen stepped back, face pale, shaking. One of the guards lowered his hand from the cuffs. The other looked around, frozen, unsure of what to do next. And then, Creed appeared, descending the glass staircase like a walking verdict. At that moment, everyone understood. Solomon's silence was never weakness. It was discipline, waiting for the exact moment when the world would have no choice but to listen. 3 days later, the name Hamilton and Creed Bank was everywhere. Primetime news, TikTok, Twitter, front-page headlines. Every outlet was talking about the Black Marine, handcuffed for wearing a hoodie, in the bank, run by the very man who once owed him his life. At a flash press conference, Daniel Creed, CEO, and the former soldier Solomon, once pulled from a battlefield, stood before a wall of microphones and cameras. His voice didn't tremble, but his eyes were red. I apologize, not just as the head of this bank, but as the man who was once carried out of enemy fire by Solomon Drayton's own hands. I won't let my brother be dishonored by prejudice, even if it means suing the very system I once believed was fair. Creed versus Hamilton and Creed Bank. The lawsuit was filed in Michigan State Court. Plaintiff: Solomon, backed by Creed and 6 Navy SEALs. Defendant: the bank's board of directors, scrambling to hide behind familiar words. It was an internal misunderstanding. But the evidence spoke louder. Surveillance footage showing Solomon being cuffed with no probable cause. A TikTok live stream with over 1 million views in 72 hours. A voice recording from a black employee. Karen once said, "People like him only come here to stir up trouble." The courtroom fell silent when Solomon's attorney played the final clip. No words, just Solomon, looking at his son's photo, while the cuffs tightened around his wrist. The image gripped the room like a vice. When the trial ended, Solomon walked out of the courtroom. No cheering, no reporters shouting, just one man waiting at the end of the hallway. Creed. They looked at each other, said nothing, then embraced, like soldiers returning from a war. Not the kind with bullets and bombs, but the kind waged in silence, in bias, in truths that no one wanted to admit. Twitter erupted. Bank justice for black veterans. Matter. We stand with Solomon. And this time, America couldn't look away. It happened during U.S. history class. Tyron's phone buzzed again and again in his pocket. Notifications, mentions, warnings, videos. He slipped it out quietly, eyes scanning the screen. But within just 5 seconds, his chest tightened. There it was, his father. Solomon Drayton, in handcuffs, inside a bank. Still his dad, but in a world Tyron had never imagined. A scene he could never unsee. A humiliation, captured on camera, and spreading. Around him, classmates whispered, checked their phones, then looked at Tyron. He stood, didn't ask to be excused, didn't explain, just walked out, eyes rimmed red. 2 days later, Tyron slipped into the courtroom, unnoticed. He took a seat in the last row, a skinny teenager in a dark hoodie, just like the one his father wore that day. At the front of the room sat Solomon, back straight, eyes fixed on the judge, not angry, not shaken, just still, like stone in fire. Tyron remembered being 9, asking his father, "Dad, were you ever scared of war?" Solomon hadn't paused. "Number war didn't break me. What breaks a man is a silent society when you need it to speak up." That night, after it was all over, Tyron posted a short video on TikTok. A single clip. His father, looking forward in the courtroom, eyes unblinking, unmoving. Caption: "My dad fought for justice and won." 3 hours later, 2.1 million views, 300,000 shares, a pinned comment near the top. This is how dignity looks in a black man. When Solomon walked out of the courtroom, his eyes met Tyron's in the very back row. They didn't smile, didn't wave. They just looked at each other, in a moment of perfect silence. And for Tyron, that was the first time he truly saw his father. Not through medals, not through uniforms, not through stories of war, but through the way a man defends his honor, without ever needing to raise his voice. 2 days after the trial, the main lobby of Hamilton and Creed Bank no longer echoed with the memory of a wrongful arrest. A scholarship ceremony. But not just any scholarship. This one carried more than money. It carried honor. Daniel Creed, the bank's CEO, stepped onto a small wooden stage. His face was still firm, but his eyes, softer now. In his hands, he held a large ceremonial check, made out to Tyron Drayton IV, full academic scholarship. The media was there. Cameras flashed, microphones pointed forward. The lobby fell completely still as Creed began to speak. We once said, banking for all. But today, I finally understand what that truly means. This young man, the son of the man who once saved my life, does not just deserve a scholarship. He deserves a future that no one has the right to block. Creed turned toward Tyran, who stood beside his father, and handed him the check. Tyran, use this not just to study. Use it to help rebuild a world that is more just. Applause started. At first, just a few people. Then the sound grew, swelling, echoing through the marble hall. From the back of the room, someone shouted, "Hero!" And right then, the 6 Navy SEALs who had stood silently behind Solomon the entire time stepped forward. In one voice, strong and clear, they declared, "Ura!" It wasn't a chant. It wasn't for show. It was a vow of loyalty, of brotherhood, of justice, of truth. Afternoon sunlight poured through the tall windows behind the stage and bathed the father and son in golden light, as if the entire bank, the whole city, was watching justice be restored in the purest form. No flags, no banners, just a father, a son, and a faith that could not be broken. The ceremony had ended. The lights in the bank lobby dimmed, leaving only a few staff members quietly packing away media equipment. Outside, Detroit glowed in soft amber, street lamps reflecting off damp pavement and windows smudged with mist and light. Solomon and Tyran stood together on the steps just outside the bank's front doors. Neither was in a hurry to leave. From the inner pocket of his suit, Solomon pulled out a small envelope, its corners slightly worn, and placed it in his son's hand. Inside was the bank card to the scholarship fund, issued in Tyran's name. "Take it," Solomon said. His voice was low, steady, needing no emphasis. "This is your mother's legacy, and I won't let anyone, not even the system, take it from you." Tyran held the card tightly, eyes fixed on his father. "And now," Solomon added, "it's your responsibility too, not just to study, but to hold on to what's right, even when no one else speaks up." Back inside the empty lobby, a bank employee walked past the teller counter and suddenly stopped. There, placed carefully on the wooden surface, was a single Marine Corps challenge coin. No note, no name, just a silent token, heavy as stone, a mark left behind by the 6 Navy SEALs, not in autographs, not in applause, but in the quiet presence of brotherhood that never needs to announce itself. As father and son walked the sidewalk together, a small street speaker crackled to life at the corner. "Ain't no mountain high enough." Motown. The familiar sound of Detroit, a city that had once broken but never bowed. Solomon said nothing. Tyran didn't speak either, just footsteps, even, slow, certain. 2 men, one who had survived war and one who had just realized. War doesn't only happen on battlefields. 3 weeks after the incident, Hamilton and Creed Bank held an unscheduled press conference. Daniel Creed stepped up to the podium. This time, no dodging, no corporate jargon. "We failed, not because of a system glitch, but because of people. And from today on, there will be no more Karens hiding behind procedures. We are terminating those responsible and launching a new policy: zero tolerance for bias, no exceptions, no excuses." Behind him, a slide appeared. "Real strength stands firm in silence, and justice rebuilds the world." At the same time, on the corner of Gratiot Avenue and Brush Street, an old, faded wall was getting a new life. A team of street artists, invited by Tyran and his friends, were brushing in the final strokes of a 5-meter mural. At the center, Solomon Drayton, head held high, eyes looking forward. To his left, Creed, hand resting on Solomon's shoulder, a quiet promise. To his right, Tyran, gripping his scholarship card, holding his future like a torch. Beneath them, in bold letters, "Justice starts here." Passers-by stopped. Some took photos. Others placed a hand on the wall and nodded silently. Tyron, along with a coalition of college students across the state, launched a new national social campaign, Number Fair Banking for All, their mission: to share stories, to gather real experiences, to raise funds, and to push for policy reform across banks nationwide. In the opening video for the campaign, Tyron stood on a Detroit street, the mural of his own family behind him. Not everyone needs to shout to be heard, but every person, at the right moment, can be the turning point that changes an entire system. And just like that, the story didn't end with a courtroom verdict or a check. It ended with a new generation, one that knew exactly what was worth protecting and what had to be changed. If this story moved you, share it. Because justice doesn't begin with judgment. It begins when someone chooses to stand up.